Our next guest speaker I'd like to introduce is Vanessa Hamill. She is here with her children, Taryn and Ian, and her family. Vanessa uses her experiences of brokenness and to help others find hope when they have the broken places. So I'd like to introduce Miss Vanessa.
Thank you for having me here tonight. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to make a long story short tonight, if that's possible. My husband, Greg Hamill, as everybody here knows, anybody that knew Greg, he had a habit of making a short story long. So I'm going to try to condense it down tonight. I would always tell him, just give me vanilla, just give me vanilla. And so tonight, I'm going to give you some vanilla and some sprinkles, and if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, I will be happy to give you whipped cream and topping. And God tells us to trust me in times of trouble, and I will rescue you, and you will give me glory. So I found that God has a purpose for our pain, our suffering, our brokenness. 3 years ago, I found myself in trouble. I was addicted to alcohol and opiates, and I had taken a dark path leading to an even darker place. Felt like half of my life was full of lies and deception and self-destruction. And for an addict, the addiction is so big, it's so cunning, it's so powerful, it basically takes over your life. Unfortunately, it's bigger than our relationships, our family, our desire to be clean. And it's even bigger than God at that time for those of us that are addicted. And I loved God, and I knew that he could save me, he could cure me, he could just make it stop, just make it all go away, and everything could just go back to normal and just stop it right there in its tracks. So I prayed that every morning. I would just pray for him to just make it stop. And God has bigger plans, and they're for his glory. I wasn't trusting him, I wasn't obedient to him, I wasn't following him, but yet I was expecting so much of him. So on February 7th of 2013, almost 3 years ago, he took me by the hand and he led me out of the storm. He didn't stop the storm, but he just took me by the hand and led me out. And there's collateral damage when you're betraying people, you're lying, you're deceptive. The collateral damage is I lost trust, I lost friendships, I lost my job, and I lost my nursing license. So I was in my boss's office, and I had admitted what I had done. And at that moment, I just surrendered. I surrendered all my perceived control, my shame, my regret, my guilt, my ugliness, my self-hatred, and I laid them at the feet of Jesus, and I was humbled to the core. And then it was time to call Greg. Greg was down the street doing a drug deal, and it's important to know that he was a DEA task force officer at the time and an Omaha undercover narcotics detective. And I told him, and anybody that knows him will not be surprised to know that he just was very calm, and he took it all in, and he said, okay, all right, I'll be right there. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I am not leaving you. I love you, and we will get through this. And God revealed himself to me that day through my husband. So Greg came in, I'm sure you guys can picture it. He came in, he took control, he scooped me up, and he loved me anyway, when I was most unlovable, unworthy, and undeserving. He got me into treatment immediately. He got me into medical treatment for withdrawal and counseling. And I was able to do outpatient at Valley Hope because Greg was my warden. He had removed me from my supply, so to speak, and he just knew that he'd followed me to the bathroom for 2 weeks, which I was thankful that he loved me that much. So I went to Valley Hope outpatient treatment. It was great. I told him in the beginning that my husband was his job and things, and people were like, we don't really want him here hanging out with us. But within 2 minutes of family night, they were in love with Greg. And I know that they liked him better than me. But anyway, they just saw him. He came in, he's like, I am not here as an officer, I am here as Vanessa's husband. And they fell in love with him. My first year of sobriety was a gift from God. I did a lot of healing, and it was an opportunity to sink deeper with God. And I was given the gift of grace and the gift of a husband's unconditional love. And I was a better wife to him. I was the wife that he deserved because I was present. The drugs, for those of us that are addicted, that are alcoholics and addicts, they make us up here. We're joyous, we're happy. The world's given us a big hug. And it's just this warm feeling, and we can't get enough of it. I feel that joy now on a regular basis. I feel it several times a day when I see my children. Just God in my heart, the Holy Spirit, it brings me that real joy. So that's pretty amazing. Another gift that God gave me was on February 2nd, so I'm sneaking up on my 1-year birthday. I'm just a few days shy of it. And God allowed me to forgive myself and ask for forgiveness. And so we were in a church sermon. It was wonderful. And we were given little strips of paper that would disintegrate in water. And we were just to write down something that we needed to be forgiven for. And so I'm borrowing paper from people around me, and I had to go up to the altar and get more, the walk of shame, and I had 6. And Taryn gave me hers because she didn't have anything to be forgiven for. She was good. But I said, I'm sorry I became a drug addict. I'm sorry I became an alcoholic. I'm sorry I put Greg's job in danger. I'm sorry to my coworkers that I let down. I'm sorry for not being present for my family. There were days that I was in bed. Everybody thought I just had the flu, or stomach flu or stomach virus, but I was in withdrawal. And I'm sorry that I put my kids in danger. And that's the hard one. But that was a gift, because I walked up to the altar and I put those 6 little pieces of paper in the pan of water, and they just went away, and I prayed and I asked God to forgive me. And it was amazing. It was like a weight was lifted. And I told Greg on the way, we were going to lunch, and I told him all about it, so he could hold me accountable. And I had said I was sorry so many times in that year. I'm sorry, I'm a loser. But I didn't ask him specifically to forgive me for those things. And that was a gift from God. 3 days later, he came home sick from work. Sicker than I'd ever seen him. And by the next day I had gotten it. By the next day the kids had it. You've all been there. The whole family has the flu. There's bodies everywhere. And we were all sick in bed, and it was my 1-year sobriety date. And Greg said, I'm supposed to take you out to dinner. Can somebody get me water? They didn't say that. Thank you, sweetheart. I said, I would rather be here in bed, surrounded by our feverish children, than where I was a year ago. And so that was also just another gift that God gave me. I just have always looked at my sobriety as completely a gift from God. By Sunday, I was getting better. Kids were kind of coming out of it, but Greg kept getting worse. And then I had never seen him that sick, and he never asked for help. And by Sunday night, he asked me to take him to the ER. And I knew that was a big deal, because he would not ask me for help. So by that, they had sent him home, and by that Tuesday morning, we had admitted him again. He was up at Methodist. And by Wednesday, well, actually in that time frame, they had diagnosed it as H1N1 flu virus. And by Wednesday, he was in the ICU. They had a BiPAP machine on him so that it would force the air into his lungs, because he could not breathe on his own. He couldn't get the air in. And I remember getting a text from him one morning right around that time. And now that I look back, I see that he was also, again, setting a foundation for the rest of my life. He said that he woke up in the middle of the night and he couldn't breathe. And he panicked, and he just prayed. He said, Jesus, help me. He said his name. He's like, help me. And he just Greg's texts were amazing. And he just described it to me, and it was so good. And he said, and I was able to go back to sleep. It's like God just helped me, and I was able to go back to sleep. On Friday, it was Valentine's Day, and he sent me a text that said, "Happy Valentine's Day, I love you, kiss the kids for me, don't even come up today, just go have fun with them, we'll just talk later." But as the days went on, or as the hours went on that day, his text would get a little bit more confused. And I chalked it up to ICU psychosis. He was on drugs to help with the pain. It was painful to breathe. And lack of oxygen, all of those things. But by that night, I was getting a strange feeling, and God was giving me another gift. I went up to the hospital, and I laid on his shoulder. His shoulders were this big. And I laid on his shoulder because that was my spot. And I spent a couple hours with him, and I would just reorient him when he'd wake up. And I'm like, God, I get it. You needed me to be strong for him. This is amazing. Why else would I have done this crazy stuff? But you took me down that path, and you made me strong, and now I'm here for him. Went home, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call that they were going to go ahead and put him on a ventilator because he was struggling so hard to breathe and he couldn't keep his saturations up. At 4 o'clock in the morning, 2 of our friends met us there at the bedside, and when I walked in, Greg's saturation was 65%. Right now, our oxygen level's in the 90s, probably high 90s right now. So he was on a ventilator with 100% oxygen, and he was 65%. His blood pressure was 60s over 40s, and I just kind of sunk to the side of the bed, and I knew this was not good. They started giving him medication to bring the blood pressure up, and then his kidneys shut down. And they told us to call in the family. They told us to call in Greg's dad, my mom, the kids. And I felt like someone punched me in the stomach and all of my air left me. And I just sunk to the side of, or actually at that time I was sunk to the couch, and I just prayed and I prayed and I said, Jesus, help me. I don't know what to do. And he did. He helped me. I felt strength. I felt peace. I was able to, for the next 4 days, we just watched him get a couple steps ahead. He'd do great, and then we'd fall maybe a step behind, or a couple steps back and then one forward. But we never thought that Greg Hamill was going to die from the flu. I was reminded of Greg's prayer, and I knew his faith. He was so bold in his faith. By that afternoon, the whole ICU, the whole floor was flooded with DEA agents, OPD, in uniform, out of uniform, my nurses, people that I had betrayed a year before that I hadn't seen or talked to, were there by my side, bringing me food and sitting with me for hours. So we knew that he was going to be on dialysis, and I said, this is okay, because when he gets better, I'll take him to dialysis. Because by this time, I was really missing my best friend. We talk and we laugh. I mean, we had a good time. So I'm like, we'll just have fun. It'll be fun for us, because I knew it was going to be a long road. And God had different plans again. And on the 4th night, there was some changes in the neurological status. And 2 weeks to the day that he came home sick, God called Greg home. And I can only imagine him at the gates of heaven being welcomed in, well done, good and faithful servant. Because his whole life, he was helping others and bold in his faith, amazing faith. He led me to Christ. He led our children to Christ, my mom, his dad. And in his life, he was helping others, and then he was also an organ donor. So his liver was planted in a 42-year-old father of 3. And that's pretty amazing too. Now I get it, God. It's like you needed me to be sober because now I am a single mom. And I felt everybody's strength, and I felt their prayers, and my faith in God got me through all of that. And Greg told me all the time, again, laying the foundation. He told me, I love you. I love our children. But in eternity with Jesus, I am ready anytime. And so again, he was just preparing me. God was putting everything into place. And now I have found myself in the season of single motherhood, and it's a place I never expected to be. But as I face trials now, if I'm lonely, if I'm angry, if I'm frustrated, if I have self-pity, fear, I don't want to mess my kids up. They're so awesome. He did such a great job, so I face these trials. If something affects me, then I go straight to my knees, and I thank God. You rescued me in times of trouble through addiction and the loss of my husband. Why do I think that you can't handle anything I come across now? Do I stumble sometimes? Absolutely. I pray for hope, I pray for wisdom, I pray for discernment, and he rescues me. He gives me real joy now, real euphoria, and that's what I was searching for some reason with the drugs and the alcohol. These things, even people, can't fill you like the love of God and a relationship with Jesus when you're full of the Holy Spirit. So he tells us, trust me in your times of trouble, and I will rescue you, and you will bring me glory. So long story short, I cannot think of a better purpose for my life, and I'm honored and humbled that he would use me to help others and to bring him glory. Thank you.